Horizon just almost UX, and this is the truth about Russia's AK-12. Is it overhyped? That's not asking purpose. Yeah, I've seen US version of this, right? But the new weapon with 6.8 millimeter or something. So this is like AK-12, Russian version of the newer weapon. Okay, so I'm guessing this is supposed to replace what, AK-47 or something? I don't even know what was the weapon that they used. I'm guessing AK-47 must be really old. After that, they were using AK-74. Was that's I don't know. Yeah, this is AK-12, so it's gonna be interesting. Free floated barrel optics. Okay, this is my channel Task and Purpose. I love this channel. He covers a lot of like military topics, geopolitics, and everything. It's like, uh, you know, basically, all the channels combined into one when it comes to military, which is like interesting. So let's go this one.
Military is planning to adjust. The regular Russian infantry are getting issued a brand new primary weapon for the first time since 1974. The new features on the next generation AK-12 tell us a ton about how the Russian military is planning to adjust their fighting doctrine for their next potential conflict, wherever that war might be. Who knows where? It's a big mystery. Your guess is as good as mine. This rifle has one of the most bizarre development stories that I've ever come across, with a bunch of weird twists and turns along the way. The AK-12 program has been teased by the Russian army for the past 10 years. It's been a big will they, won't they. It's been cancelled and restarted multiple times. In fact, the finalized AK-12 is so different from the original 2011 prototype that they only share 10% of their parts in common. Don't worry, if the AK-12 ends up failing, Russia has a backup plan with shovel throwing. It's a casual Monday night in America. So why did the Russian military decide they needed to upgrade now of all times? What new features does the AK-12 have, and why were they required to do a complete redesign from the ground up in order to finally get the green light on full-rate production? This is the truth about the Russian Army's AK-12. So the whole reason the Russian...
Yeah, I think the Kalashnikov's main, the whole thing about them is like trying to make sure that something is like simple and reliable as can be. So making it really simple is kind of important. So the original design felt like it was more complicated. That's the way it looks. So this feels more close to how an AK should look. So they're trying to make it more simplistic, which is always a Russian goal. Trying to make sure like everything's so simple that anybody can basically maintain it and it's cheaper.
Russian army set out to replace their old AK-74 was because it had received some criticism for being less accurate and more difficult to mount multiple optics when compared to its American counterpart, the M4. If the Russians could just fix those ergonomic problems, they would have the greatest assault rifle in history. For the past 20 years, the Russian army has only issued about 3 or 4 optics per platoon. That wasn't going to work anymore in a modern conflict. The Russian Ministry of Defense set out to find a distinguished AK for the modern era. In 2010, there was a change of leadership at Abrams-X, the famous Russian weapons manufacturer. Vladimir Zlobin became the chief designer, and the first thing he realized was that the company was going to be in major financial trouble if they didn't do something big and do it now. He saw an opportunity in the Ratnik military modernization program. Zlobin thought if he could build a next-generation AK and win that contract, it would solve all their problems and save the company. Zlobin's visionary prototype was a revolutionary departure from the original AK series. It had the ability to switch from a 5.45 to a 7.62 caliber with a simple barrel swap. It got rid of the iconic AK dust cover fire selector for a Western-style ambidextrous thumb selector. It had the ability to fire faster in its hyper burst mode than in its full auto mode. They were experimenting with a feature that would make the bolt stay open after the last round fired, just like on the M4 counterpart. This was the first military AK platform to feature a built-in American Picatinny rail system, which would allow Russian soldiers to finally know the pleasure of spending half your paycheck on unnecessary accessories so you could take cool selfies with the boys. Zlobin revealed his AK-12 to the world in 2011, and it was actually really well received.
Half a paycheck? Take a loan out, man. Half a paycheck was gone long ago.
I mean, at least on paper it sounded amazing. It even had these sweet double and triple stacked polymer thick magazines that went perfectly with the Russian unique fetish for drum magazines. All aboard the hype train, last stop, high expectations. But if you thought the Russians loved something that was revolutionary, you're wrong. The military understandably likes to play things safe. When Zolbin's AK-12 prototype went through the harsh stress tests done by the Russian army, the results went horribly wrong for him. Dmitry Semirazyov, the general director of the Russian arms testing, who was close to the trials, said, quote, "The trials are ending. They're around 80% complete right now, but there are serious flaws in it." Zolbin tried to defend his prototype AK-12 by saying that the weapon was specifically sent there to, quote, "highlight all snags and weaknesses in the new development," which is the same thing I say every time when viewers point out that I made a mistake in one of my videos. That's right, I'm not a dummy, I just put that mistake there to make sure you're all paying attention. Zolbin went on to say that he would make
I like it was just like, oh, this is R&D. What you talking about? Yeah, I mean, I think the whole, now Russian Federation before Soviet Union, their whole mentality has always been like, I don't know, don't give me any revolution. Even though they were the first one to okay, we're gonna put, tank autoloaders, which feels like very anti what they would do, but okay. But yeah, anything like new revolution, they would be like, no, let's try to make it simplistic. That's the always feeling I get from them.
Any necessary changes in order to get it ready for state trials that were happening in 2013, the next year. Vladimir's version was found to have reliability and durability issues, which are two things that an AK simply cannot fail at. As the final nail in the coffin, it costs 6 times as much to manufacture his version as the AK-74M. As many of you know, that's the cardinal sin in AK design. You can't be unreliable, costly, and call yourself a true AK platform. So the Russian army canceled the AK-12 like it just sent out an inappropriate joke on Twitter. In 2012, the Deputy Defense Minister Alexander Slavnikov said the Russian army would not be buying any AK-12s at all, because they already had millions of AK-74 rifles stockpiled, which they thought were just as good. They believed that Abrams, the company, was in really bad financial shape and that they wouldn't be able to make any of the necessary recommended fixes to the rifle. The bad news was that the historic Abrams company was falling apart, and they were close to shutting down their factories for good. They had been producing Kalashnikovs since the 1950s, but recently production was down by 50%. Things were not looking good for them. It was going to take a miracle from a historic AK developer to turn this around. So the situation at Abrams was so bad that in 2012, the legendary Mikhail Kalashnikov, the original inventor of the AK-47, sent a letter to the Kremlin explaining how dire the situation was, saying, quote, "Irreversible changes may take place at the enterprise, leading to its disappearance and to the vanishing of brands such as Kalashnikov and Dragunov." Thankfully, Putin took note, and this led to a major reorganization, where the company was saved by merging with Abrams, its sister company, into what is known as the Joint Kalashnikov Concern. This happened in 2014. And as some of you might know,
basically the guy Kalashnikov just told Putin, "You're not gonna have your weapons. Like Dragunov, don't you like that sniper? Yeah, now Kalashnikov, you're not gonna have your AK-47. What you gonna do? How you gonna invade Ukraine?" It's just like Putin's like, "Oh, we can't have that."
no, it's all owned by Rostec, which is a state-controlled conglomerate. So basically, it was now the Russian government competing with itself for the contract. As if to prove that that was the case, in 2014, the Russian military accidentally released a press release where they announced that the AK-12 had already been adopted. They quickly retracted the statement though. To me, that kind of says that the adoption of the AK-12 at this point was a foregone conclusion. Now that Kalashnikov Concern was owned by Rostec, which is owned by the Russian government, the AK-12 was going to happen one way or another as soon as it passed the trials. With this merger, Vladimir Zolbin was then switched to the Special Weapons Division at the company, and he was replaced in the lead designer role by somebody named Sergei Ermetsev. The first feedback Sergei received from the Russian military was the following, quote, "The manufacturer can try to solve the many problems with reliability, durability, and high production costs, but only at its own expense." Sergei had a choice to make. Under his new leadership, they went back to the drawing board and did another clean slate redesign of the AK-12 weapon. But how was the AK-12 going to be different this time around? What could they change to convince the Russian military to adopt it? Well, Sergei decided to go into a completely different direction with the new prototype by making the executive decision to do absolutely nothing to rock the boat. When you look at the new prototype that they busted out in 2016, you can tell that they wanted to earn brownie points major here by making it look way less Western influenced and returning to classic AK fire selector and look. This second version of the AK-12 would be more traditional, and it's based on the proven AK-400. If you like getting your military analysis from people in their sweatpants at home, subscribe to this channel. On September 6, 2016, Sergey unveiled his version of the AK-12, and this is what we ended up with getting after all this media hype. It was actually a pretty modest small improvement over the AK-74. It weighed 7.7 pounds unloaded, which is very slightly less than the AK-74. It had a slightly increased effective range to 440 meters, thanks to its reduced felt recoil, thanks to the buttstock being in line with the new free-floated barrel. This version had the really unusual, strange 2-round burst mode. I guess we're just arbitrarily picking burst numbers now. What's next, a 12-round burst? I give up. Wait, can we for 1 second talk about this Dollar General camouflage going on here? What is this, we're just sticking branches onto our uniform now, and that's a ghillie suit? Don't get me wrong, America can't say anything either. They're the geniuses that came up with the UCP camouflage. Final AK-12 has a rate of fire of 650 rounds per minute. It fires the same 545 by 39 millimeter intermediate cartridge. There are some sources that mistakenly
is that even an improvement? Like, small thing, it's just like AK-74 version 2 or something. But then again, you need to see, like, Russia is not overflowing with money like USA is, right? So they can just spend the money. They can just like rehaul their whole fucking weapon, make a new ammo like US did, and do all that shit, right? They're like, we already have the ammo that we use. We already have parts from 74 that we can basically repurpose or something. So they're just trying to improve what they have, I guess.
Claim that the AK-12's range is 800 meters, just because the iron sights are capable of being sighted up to 800 meters. But that's like saying my '08 Toyota Camry can go 220 miles per hour because that's the max speed on the speedometer. I would argue the most important part of the AK-12 system.
Not gonna lie, when I was a kid, that's what I was thinking. Like, oh my god, my speedometer says like 100, I don't know, it was 180 or something, and I had like a small hatchback at that time or something. I don't know. It's like, oh my god, my car can do no, my car can't even do close to that shit. Yeah, so it probably was like 65 horsepower or something. It was like, I don't know, 15, not even 50. How many years ago? 10, 15, 18 years ago, something.
Is the 1P87 red dot holographic sight and the 1PN38 thermal sight that they're going to be issuing to all frontline soldiers. This is a major departure in Russian doctrine. It's going to provide the biggest performance boost for Russian infantry since the AK-74. So all these new AK-12 features, they don't sound like they're that new. It's almost like they could have called it the AK-74MA2. But too late. We're already on the AK-12 hype train here. Mikhail Durakhmaniev is the editor-in-chief of Kalashnikov magazine, and he agreed that this actually isn't a big change, and he tried to temper people's expectations, that this was just a minor upgrade from the AK-74 when he said, quote, "There are improvements, but very modest on the background of excessive expectations triggered by a media campaign," end quote. But that's not exactly the right way to think about the AK-12 either, because it completely misses the true potential of the new platform. The fact that the AK series for the first time ever is a system, the value of the Picatinny rails cannot be overstated. In a vacuum, they're worthless, but with an investment from the Russian military into buying additional optics, the AK-12 just got augmented in ways that the AK-74 never could. It's really important that we talk about the optics because they're going to be make or break for the AK-12 system. From what I understand, Ian from Forgotten Weapons and Oxide, the YouTube channel, have both tried out the standard issue new Russian optic, and they found them to be not great. The other problem with the Russian army, to me, appears to be that from training footage and photos, the majority of Russian soldiers still do not have a holographic red sight issued to them yet. Now this could just be because the troops on the front line are the ones that get priority access to the scopes, but either way, I think it's going to take Russia a few years to make scopes a standard operating procedure. They also have this different doctrine where they put night vision directly on their weapon instead of mounted to their helmet, which is interesting. The only question was whether the Russian army would actually follow through on delivering the full rate of production, and that leads us to our next part.
Yeah, obviously they're trying to do some modification that might push it to the, like, I guess future of the weapons, I guess, but scope is what it is, right? But I don't know, like, few improvements. Couldn't have just done something with AK-74 rather than making something that you call it AK-12. I don't know.
After all these false starts and redos in the program and their history of creating prototypes and then not mass producing them, we would have to wait to see what would happen here. In June 2017, the AK-12 passed its military field tests, and by January 2018, the Russian military announced that both the AK-12 and its 7.62mm version, the AK-15, had been adopted by the regular infantry. The competition, the AEK-971, was also adopted, but would primarily be used by special operations soldiers. According to TASS.com, the Russian military had delivered approximately 100,000 rifles and were ahead of schedule, proving they were committed to this new rifle. Where would the new firearms go first? Straight into the hands of Russian soldiers who were deployed to the most dangerous areas, like Crimea and Syria. Recently, the Russian military had made moves to amass over 100,000 soldiers on the Ukrainian border in November of 2021. This sounded all kinds of alarms and speculation at NATO, where many believed a Russian invasion was imminent. The AK-12 and these upgrades would make a huge difference in a battle with Ukraine, and it looks to me like they're getting these fancy new rifles just in time for them to force the Ukrainians into provoking them on the border so that they can have an excuse to invade, which I really resent because I'm pretty sure they stole that move from the US military when we did it in Iraq. The soldiers stationed
How old is this video? I didn't even see the timeline.
there are largely outfitted with the AK-12, optics, laser targeting devices, and night vision, which is a stark contrast to how the Russian soldiers appeared in the 2014 Ukrainian-Russo conflict. So what did we learn here? What did the whole AK-12 saga procurement program tell us about the Russian military? Well, maybe the real AK-12 was the friends that we made along the way. No, that's not right. What I'm saying is, it tells us that the Russian army had a revolutionary design in front of them with the original AK-12 prototype, but they scrapped it. And then they bought the whole company, and they had a rifle designed the way that they wanted, how they wanted it. And maybe that's for the best. They focused on upgrading the only minor part of the AK that was holding the platform back at the time, its ergonomics, which tells us they will be heavily investing in optics in the future. The AK-12 might just be an AK-74 with lipstick on it, but if you ask me, that lipstick looks hot.
The problem with this is like maybe they should have kept the original prototype, not mass produce it if they can't, right? Give it to special forces or something. Just like use it at whatever number they can, and just upgrade the AK-74 with this optics type of modification. Rather than calling this AK-12, they should have just called this AK-74 version 2 or something, and kept the original prototype, kept the original thing, even though it was costly, and tried to make it as much as they can before they are at the point where they can mass produce it. That would have been better rather than just scrapping the original idea completely because you can't mass produce at that number, and just like making this, which is like barely an upgrade. I don't know. Yeah, I think that would have been better. They should have kept the better version there, even if they can produce it. Should have still do this, but yeah, eventually they would have gone to the like that, because this is like ammo is the same, everything is same. It's barely a upgrade in a way to the AK-74. So they could have done this now without having much investment, and they could have kept the prototype for the future and just slowly produce it. I don't know, that would have been better. Right, but that was the truth about Russia's AK-12 by channel tasking purpose. If you like my next video, subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you next time.